the contractor was threatening to turn away any new contractors that I bring onto my project. The second closest bid was like $40,000 more expensive. And so I thought I hit the jackpot.
It'll be next week. Okay, it'll be next month. Okay, we'll be done in 2 weeks. Okay, we'll be done in another 2 weeks.
You're paying the premium for somebody that knows how to get the job done.
There's like so many things that I learned through this process. Yeah, it is high touch, it is hospitality, but 80% of that stuff can be taken care of through technology.
All right. Welcome to another episode of the Agent to Investor podcast, where we talk about the agent side of real estate investing. We'll be talking about the successes, the failures, and all in between. My name is Nico Garcia, local real estate agent and investor based out of Montgomery County, Maryland. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host,
Anna Bilek, Northern Virginia realtor and mostly out-of-state investor.
And today we have another wonderful guest. We have our good friend Davis Song coming back, second time back. Welcome back, brother.
Thanks for having me. Just appreciate you guys welcoming me back. It's always fun.
And for those who don't know, we had Davis on episode 35 going about his backstory, how he got liberated from his W-2 to get into real estate investing. So definitely tune into that episode to get a little bit more of Davis's backstory. But today we're going to talk about a pretty cool topic, actually two topics, but one I don't think we spend a lot of time on, and that's contractors, the construction side of real estate investing, because that can be a hurdle for a lot of people that don't have any knowledge on construction costs and contractors and vetting contractors. I know Anna's been going through this as well with her projects. My father's a contractor, so I know a little bit about that side. But we'll go into Davis because I know you're in the middle of this right now, and we'll talk about this project specifically. You mind sharing a little bit of the backstory of what's going on and, where you're at now?
Yeah, where to begin? So yeah, I am in the middle of my first flip. So I typically do BRRRRs. So I'm a buy and hold investor if I can. This one in particular is a flip. I've actually held on to it. It was a buy and hold. And I recently went through an eviction a few months ago and decided to get out of or just sell off the property. But basically, there's so many things that I learned through this process, and there's always something that I learned. But I would say the biggest thing with this one is the contractor communication has been such a challenge. And I feel like that is the most common thread when it comes to this type of work. And I don't even mean from a language perspective. It's English is his first language. It's not something like that. It's more about managing expectations, following through on what things will be agreed on at the start of the project, and just like that level of committing to what has been agreed to. So a lot of the stuff that I'll talk about, at least today, is not to just complain from an investor's perspective, because I feel like this is another common theme, right? People are like, it's so hard to find a good contractor and this and that. I say all these things knowing that there's also complaints from the contractor's perspective too, right? Maybe there's some communication things, and then maybe like expectations are like way out of whack or something like that. So I do want to preface that because I know it goes both ways. There's always two sides to every coin. Nico, I know your dad's a contractor, so I respect that too. And so I guess this project, it got kicked off at the beginning of February, and I was promised that it would be completed in 2 months. So that brings us to April. Right now, obviously, we're at the end of June, and I got the learnings from my previous work, and I thought I set it up, the contract, the way I should have and everything. But and I didn't use this like bonus, like penalty thing, which we can talk about a little bit more later. It was just a hard deadline. And weeks and weeks past that project was supposed to be completed, there's no end in sight. And I'm just getting increasingly frustrated. Tensions are building up. And at one point, the contractor was threatening to turn away any new contractors that I bring onto my project. And so it was very contentious. And that's just one example. And it's just got like crazy personal. There's so many times where this particular contractor would bring up things that have nothing to do with me or my project or what we agreed on. He'd talk about how some other contractor is like cheating him another client is cheating him out of $2,000. he had an issue with me being on vacation. It's crazy. It's, dude, I'm not paid to work on the project. Like, you're paid to be on the project. Me having personal time on vacation with my wife shouldn't have anything to, like, that has nothing to do with you. So those are just a couple of examples of the type of conversations that we were having.
I have a question, Davis.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you mentioned that this was, correct me if I'm wrong, this was one that you were renting out and you had to deal with an eviction. What made you decide you wanted to fix and flip it and to get rid of it? Was there any story behind that?
Yeah, for sure. The reason why I decided to sell it is because it's in a market where I don't really focus in. It's just the one property in that market. I mainly focus in the Hampton Roads area or Northern Virginia. And so I'm just trying to double down. I took the opportunity of the eviction and all that stuff to actually renovate the home and then sell it off so I can just double down on the places that I'm comfortable in.
Gotcha.
So
Yeah.
is this property out of state for you?
No, it's still in state.
Okay.
It's in Richmond, like the Richmond
Okay.
general area. And by the way, I'll spare some of the specifics because we're like in the middle of some potentially like a civil suit. So I'll if I'm being vague, that's the reason why. But yeah, so it's in the Richmond market. So where are we? So after a certain point, we're well beyond the deadline. And then I'm like, okay, let's do a change order. There's a couple other things to change, but as a part of that, we'll do this bonus penalty structure. And what that means is, for those who aren't familiar with that, is for every day that you're beyond a completion date, then you're penalized, quote unquote, by whatever amount makes sense per day. So these structures they're different from agreement to agreement, but the way I did it was $100 per day beyond the completion date.
And Davis, I know we just talked about this off camera, and this is one strategy or tactic that we read from the David Green Burr book, right? And it's exactly what Davis is mentioning. You give a timeline, or you talk to the contractor and be realistic, right? If he's saying 2 months, say, hey, we'll give you 2 months, but maybe we'll give you 3 months so that, the contractor's happy, or for example, and that way you say, hey, I'm giving you an extra month. If it's after that, then there's a penalty. If it happens before that, we'll reward you. We'll pay you, in Davis's case, $100 extra because you said you were going to get it done in 3 months and you got it done in a month and a half, for example. Now, all these numbers are negotiable, but I love that strategy because it not only does it hold the contractor accountable, but you set those expectations up front, right, Davis?
Yeah, exactly. And that little additional buffer is a good point because it shows that you are trying to work with them and you're like a reasonable person. And if it's it's contract work. So oftentimes there's delays like weather or whatever. And so you're being reasonable by saying, you know what, I'll give you an additional week or two or whatever. That is a nice inclusion as far as the specific deadline. And I think, like, in this particular case, I would say the one nuance is that I did a little chat GPT and like research and stuff, and I'm not a lawyer. Uh, Specifying that it's liquidated damages rather than a specific, like a penalty, is very specific legal language. And there is a distinction because if you say penalty, for one reason or another, it's harder for a judge or the courts to actually follow through with holding them accountable. If you say liquidated damages, then that means you're actually quantifying because you're actually losing money for every
Mhm.
day that you're past deadline. And that specific language is important, I realize, because just one of the learnings that I got throughout this process. So anyway, that whenever we did the change order, the new deadline was the beginning of June. And again, that's what, almost 4 weeks now past deadline again. And we're stuck in the situation where I don't want this guy on this project anymore. Like, I can't trust him to finish the work. He keeps like over promising and under delivering and so forth. And so now I'm in the process of getting bids for other contractors and getting him to sign a warranty, because this is another learning that I had was I didn't have warranty specific language in the original contract. So now I have to play nice and play this game of having him sign a warranty agreement and then continuing the rest of this conversation about terminating the contract, not finishing the rest of the work and so forth. Yeah.
What I love about this, Davis, is you're mentioning that this is your first flip, right? And you're making adjustments. You're talking about how, hey, if I did things differently now, you're learning a lot as you go. And especially with the flip, we always tell people flips are always the hardest first investment property, right? Because there's so many moving parts, there's holding costs, there's the construction part of it, but you're learning, right? There's a big learning curve in the flipping business. If you have a little bit of a construction background, maybe you have a leg up of some other competitors, but maybe you don't. You're going to learn a ton. But Davis, I wanted to talk specifically about the scope of work of this project. When you went in and you started looking at what needed to be done, were you looking at comps and trying to adjust your construction costs that way? And how did the contractor figure out the scope of work? Did you work with him together?
Yeah, I mean, we started with comps. I'm trying to just renovate it to a level where it makes sense and not over renovate for the neighborhood. I'd say it's like maybe a class C plus neighborhood. But yeah, so I started with the comps and then I got multiple bids on the project and he happened to be the cheapest one and also was a great communicator from the get-go. And I set a pretty good precedence early on. And so I felt good about him, but it just went off the rails like halfway through the project. But as far as the level of renovation, I just started with comps and then took a look at the pricing and so forth.
What did you
Okay.
end up doing, Davis? What kind of work?
Yeah, we almost a full gut, but we changed out the roof. We light foundation work, added a bathroom. So it's a 4-bed, 1 bath. So we added 1 bathroom and then flooring, HVAC, like a whole bunch of stuff. So the scope was pretty big and like the price was so good. The second closest bid was like $40,000 more expensive. And so I was like, oh, I hit the jackpot when I found this guy. And it was a recommendation, by the way. So there's the trusted agent that I have in that area recommended this contractor. And so I felt extra good about it. I guess the learning there is, I know recommendations are really important. You start there, but I don't know. What would you guys do? Have you guys ever experienced the same situation where somebody has a strong recommendation and it just doesn't work out at all?
Yeah. Lesson learned now is asking for references that you can call and chat with past clients. Or I Google or Yelp the ish out of pretty much everybody at this point, where I like look up for any past discrepancies in their work. Someone told me you can look up the Better Business Bureau, see if they've had any complaints filed against them in the past. But it is tough. So I was going to go back and ask you because Richmond is in state, but it's not close enough to go visit the job site every day. I don't think you go visit the job site every day. So you needed boots on the ground. What about the other contractors? Were they also recommendations? Because you said you got multiple bids. Where did you get these contractors from? Like the whole list. One was a referral.
Yeah. And then one, they actually renovated my primary home and did an incredible job. Just so good, but was super expensive. And so we were able to justify him for the primary home because we live in it, me and my
Mhm.
wife. And so we had him naturally. The next job that I had was this one. And he drove all the way down there, gave a bid and everything. But he turned sour on me too because he felt he wasted his time. And that's another topic because you're not promised a job. You may feel good about it and,
Yeah.
about a past job and you feel strong as a contractor that you're almost like guaranteed the work, but you're not necessarily. And anyway, so that was one. And then the other one was just like a cold call. I found them on Thumbtack. And so I did
Yeah.
have 3 bids. I tried to triple bid every single project, but we ended up with this guy who was a personal recommendation.
And I will say sometimes the cheapest bid isn't always the best one, which is what I've come to learn because like we had a contractor, they were like the B team in this one project. They're finally done a year in. They were supposed to be done like 6 months after we bought it. Now it's a year almost to the date and they're finally almost done. But the amount in holding costs and additional things that we've had to pay because of the delays, it almost sounds like in some cases it's almost better to go with the devil if was the other contractor you were talking about, were they the ones that were close?
As far as the
Yeah.
bid is concerned,
Yep.
I think he was like maybe $50,000 off. So I think his bid came in at a little over 100,000
Mhm.
and this guy came in at like 50,000. And I think there's a learning there for me too. Like I tried to be respectful because I wanted to work with that my preferred contractor, like in the future, if not this one. And so I was like, hey, listen, obviously, like, really appreciate you going down there and like drawing, sketching stuff and all this stuff. And for the bid, the number is pretty far off for me. But if you want it, I'll give you a part of the job. You can do the plumbing work. I know he's really good at plumbing. So I was like, you can have that if you'd like. if not totally get it. And so I was trying to be cordial, but I think he was just had it in his head that it was his and just didn't feel good about it. And now he won't come back to finish some of the light work as a part of his warranty for the primary home. Which sucks. And it's more than that. That's light work. I could do that myself, but I hope that bridge hasn't been burned because of that situation either.
So Davis, can I hop in there? Because I agree. And all three of us are investors, right? And a lot of people that are going to be listening to this are investors. But I always want to put the other side, and I know you touched about it as well. Put yourself in the contractor's shoes. If you're driving around and giving free estimates for a bunch of people and never getting business, that might put a bad taste in your mouth. I manage a lot of my dad's projects, and nowadays he's been in the business for so long, only referral based, right? He's picky about who he chooses with. And the good contractors are going to be like that, right? They have a good book of business. They're really busy, and they might cost a little bit more. And basically what you're paying the premium for is somebody that knows how to get the job done, isn't going to cut corners, and is the work with integrity, good communication. And that's what you're paying for. So when I know Davis talked about this as well, is you want to value these contractors. If they say they're going to give a free estimate, maybe say, hey, if you come out here, especially if it's an hour away, I'll give you $400, $300 for your time. Because unfortunately, investors, a lot of people use these contractor bids to bid against one another, and you end up wasting everyone's time. I just wanted to touch on that from the other side, because contractors are relationship and referral based usually, and the good ones are gonna be busy.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. That thought crossed my mind too. I would have been like, hey, I know there's no guarantee in the work. To me, it goes without saying, but it's nice to just verbalize that and pay him a few $100 or whatever to make sure that it's worth his time. Honestly, I think looking back, yeah, I would have definitely handled it that way. And I think like this contract, I had a thought as you were speaking, I'm blanking on it, but I think we'll have to edit that part out. But yeah, so I do agree with that.
And I just also wanted to touch, because I know Anna brought this up before we started recording, about how she gets bids from multiple contractors. And I really like that idea. I think she says she uses a template. You mind sharing a little bit about that, Anna?
So actually, I haven't done this yet but I got this actual tip from a couple of other investor friends that we have, and Omni actually also brought it up, because I think David's green book, along with telling you to put bonuses and penalties or liquidated losses, he also talked about getting estimates from contractors and getting them to bid against one another in the version of whatever book I read from him. But what I've learned is, like, most contractors don't want to put the time to put the cost, or I understand they don't want to. They don't have the time to put together detailed cost estimates for every single person, kind of what Nico was saying, and then have people basically slice and dice it and do what you were doing, which was thinking about, hey, I'll give you the plumbing work. And a lot of contractors don't like to do that, because then they feel like they can't control the rest of the work. They can't control the schedule, especially if they pride themselves on their work. They can't, like, they might do poorly, but it's because of someone else not giving the timing correctly or whatever. But anyways, what I learned was, because contractors were not willing to give us these cost estimates, was to have a template where you basically have a cost estimate of your own as the investor. And it takes some time to learn how to estimate projects, but put one together on your own. Take the time to walk through the property, put together a basic cost estimate, and then share that with contractors. And the contractors that I actually know and have spoken to that say that investors that use that tactic, they are more willing to work with them and fine tune that estimate, because that investor clearly puts time and effort and puts skin in the game by putting together an estimate of their own accord. And then they can work together to fine tune that estimate. So that was something that I was like, oh my God, that's genius. So I got a template from a friend of mine who is a contractor and an investor to start utilizing for the next project.
Yeah, I like that a lot, because I think most contractors, in my experience, they hate the paperwork. And it's just, that's why when you goes out there and tries to estimate, on average, I think I get the estimate back like maybe 4 days later, maybe 3 days later. So it's there. Most contractors, they like the work. They like getting their hands dirty. They like actually like producing something. The paperwork stuff, they'd rather hand it off to somebody else. So I love that solution, because you're doing a lot of the heavy lifting for them that they don't normally like to do anyway.
Correct. With the template, you can get the level of detail that you want as an investor, because that's what I have noticed when we have gotten estimates from contractors that are at a very high level. Like it's like bathroom, do some plumbing, general labor, general material, but it doesn't get into the weeds because they don't want to take the time to do a detailed estimate if you're not going to go with them. But if you're providing the template, you can go down as detailed as you want.
And I just wanted to second rely what Davis mentioned. A lot of the contractors are not good with the paperwork. In some cases, at least here locally, they might be Latino or Hispanic and they don't really know how to write the contract. So they relay with their team, myself, to write the contracts. And so they're providing something like that. And it could be super helpful for somebody that's like, all right, this is black and white. They're providing this. Then all I have to do is fill in how much are materials for this, how much is labor for this. And it could be a really helpful tool for, I think if an investor came to us with that could really be a game changer.
Yeah. And it's also like from the investor's perspective, a nice, not advantage, but because you get to craft the language how it makes sense for your business too. And then if they have questions about it, you can just have that conversation. But you're like setting up that anchor, that baseline of this is your expectation. And it also saves them time from the get-go. So I do like that angle.
Yeah.
So Davis, what's next for this project?
Yeah. One thing about, I'll say before I forget, if I could turn it all back, of the 3 bids, I still would have gone with the one that I'm comfortable with because I'm going to get the quality. And yeah, that's a very big difference in the price. But what happened in the last 2 months in the market? Like it shifted pretty significantly.
Okay.
And so I think a swing on this particular property, the swing is on sales price alone, probably like $20,000. And then beyond that, the holding costs from month to month. And beyond that, the headache that I've been going through, I think it would have been well worth it. And maybe I would have left some money on the table, but I could move on to another project,
This happened last time.
that needs my attention too. So in hindsight, I would have still gone with him, even knowing that I would have lost some money in the upfront.
When you say you would have gone with him, you would have went with the guy that did work on your primary?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So the next steps in a flip are to get it resold, right? So I know this is, you just talked about actually a shifting market, right? And I'm curious to how you're planning to price your flip. Is there anything specific that you plan on doing to try and get your remodeled home in the best light for the next buyer?
So I think I'm going to do for sale by owner to recoup some of my losses, but also like to educate myself too. And so I'll probably pick your brands as I go whenever I get to that point. But yeah, so that's what I plan on doing. Again, first flip. So I don't know all the details, obviously professional photographs. I changed a couple of things. So one way that I tried to make lemonade out of lemons is the contractor also destroyed my front gate, like my front fence, like to get equipment through to the backyard. And I'm like, and he did it in multiple places. Like you couldn't just, you destroyed one part, just go through the same part. Why did you need to destroy a quarter of the fence, right? So that's another thing. But now I'm like, okay, if I'm going to have to tear it down, repair it, it's a chain link fence anyway. So I'm just going to take the whole thing out and I'm just going to replace it with a picket fence that's going to be more attractive to the buyer. And so that's one thing that I think will hopefully elevate the price. I wasn't going to do like landscaping and have a lawn. It's like dirt in the front lawn and the back really. But now through the course of the project, I'm like, okay, let's try to elevate this more and just have grass all through the front and the back. As far as the plan, after I finish the project, photographs, and I don't know if you guys have heard of this product called Room Brick. The owner of the company is actually one of my clients from a property on the property management side. And so it's VROOMBRICK.com. I'm not getting paid for that, but basically it just walks through somebody like me to go through a for sale by owner and goes through like a checklist of like, all right, step by step, after you do this part, do this and make sure all the paperwork's in order and all that. And they'll take like a 1% cut from the sales price. And so I'm going to experiment with that product. And plus he's a client, so I think he'll give me a little bit more attention, hopefully. So I'm going to try that out. So I'll report back to you guys to see if that was a success.
Okay.
I was like, as an agent, I don't know how I feel about this.
Are you what? Sorry. Oh, as an agent? Yeah, I'm sure
it's leverage us.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's definitely benefits working with an agent. It's risky on my part. I know, because like I've never done this before and I'm relying on technology that's pretty new. I could easily just go to one of you guys and help me out, but we'll see how it goes.
Did we circle back on the penalties and bonuses? Did you actually incorporate that with this? Did you incorporate this into your change order with the contractor that acknowledged you're now firing them? But did that ever make it into your contract?
Yeah, I did it. So it wasn't on the onset at the original contract, but yes, on the change order, I did. Another thing that I realize is you need to have another deadline past that deadline where they incur a penalty, because in fact, theoretically, it could just continue on and you really
Yeah.
don't have a hard date of when you can say they breached the contract.
Okay.
So that's another learning that I had. So now it's like a little bit of confusion. I'm working with an attorney and they're like, okay, that makes it a little bit of a gray area. But for example, you need to do like, all right, by this date, every day after that, penalize or whatever the language, liquidated damages of $100 per day. But if you go beyond 3 weeks of that date, then that's effectively a breach. And that just makes it easier if it goes to court.
Okay. All right. And so how did
Okay.
you broach the conversation with the contractor about bringing up this penalty or reward, carrot or stick like structure into the contract? Like I'm curious how you negotiated that in, because I don't know if a lot of contractors have dealt with that. And I would love to know how to get into that conversation with a contractor and bring it.
I would say it's similar to what Nico was saying as far as giving that buffer. So have them verbalize what they expect when they expect it to be finished, and then give them a few extra days or whatever. But it's like hard to like verbally, once the words come out, and then you introduce it, put it on paper. And then if they start hesitating, you're going to be like, hey, wait a second, you just verbalized it. Are you not a man or woman of your word? So it's like easier from an investor's perspective to have that once it's already discussed. The number of where I landed on $100 a day is based on my holding costs. And then a little bit more because beyond holding costs, like I need to just put it on the market. So I didn't just pull the $100 out of nowhere. The number, like as long as you have the calculation, then again, they know you're being reasonable in how you got to that number. And then it can be a more rational conversation.
So Davis, I think if you word it like this, hey, I know rehab projects rarely go as scheduled, right? So you're telling me you can get it done in 2 months. I'm going to give you 3 months just because I know that there's a few things that you really can't handle, whether it's permitting or things like that. And that way you're like, hey, I'm helping you out with a month. And that way, maybe that softens the conversation a bit. Okay, this guy, he wants my business. He's giving me an extra month. I'm okay with maybe if I go past 3 months for that $100 a day penalty because that. So I think that could be a good pro tip just coming from the contractor side. But I did want to give a space to Anna because I know we gave an update about her rehab projects. And I'm just curious, now that you've gone through it and you're in the process of getting these units rented, what is one thing, I know Davis gave a few different tips and learning lessons. What is one thing that you would have changed now that you're going, or for your next rehab project?
All of it. No, I definitely would go forward with the template to do the cost estimate and get something a little bit more itemized to understand where the costs are really coming from. I will acknowledge we got one of those high level cost estimates that I was referring to. So they gave us one, but it wasn't super defined. And so we have gone over schedule by 6 months. There was no penalty. We've just been dragging along and the scope of work still like fit, or I won't say the scope of work. Let me rephrase that. The work still fit with, he gave us an estimate and somehow he came in right at that dollar amount. We were like, can we find some cost savings? Can we do something? We have all these holding costs, but somehow, and they always seem to match that number. And I feel like if I had something that was a little bit more defined of a cost estimate, we could have pointed to direct things to see where the line items were. So I will say that. I will say a more defined scope of work, definitely the carrot versus the stick mentality with a bonus or like having that discussion of like, how long do you think? Okay, we're going to give you an extra month on top of that and then do some kind of bonus structure or penalty structure, depending on how it went. It's tough because ours is out of state. It's similar to Davis. Like we're not driving 4 hours to go to this property every day. So I think having that level of detail and kind of oversight would have definitely helped. I will say, and I don't know how to manage this, but something that I think that contractors probably do get frustrated with is what is called scope creep. I learned that from my government days because we had stuff that ended up coming up that we didn't know what we didn't know that we did have to add in. So that's something I guess to be cognizant of. I'm open to suggestions, but figuring out how to write that into the contract that if there is scope creep where there's things that are added in is like, how does that get into the added to the contract with the change orders? I guess like we didn't have that level of detail, which I definitely would go for in the future, and accountability. That's probably the biggest thing that I have learned during this project. And now that I've asked people about it, I'm like, damn, I wish I would have known this a year ago.
But you had a project manager on site?
No, so the GC was essentially the project manager, and then he had crews that he was bringing in, and like his crews that do the work. And it was just he just had lots of projects going on, so like we just ended up fitting in the cracks of time. I don't think he would ever say that. That's how we felt because we never got an exact. I can't point to. Maybe my husband can. I can't point to any one specific reason why we are so far delayed. It'll be next week. Okay, it'll be next month. Okay, we'll be done in 2 weeks. Okay, we'll be done in another 2 weeks. And it's what happened. It rained and we don't want to make the house muddy. That was some of the stuff that we heard was it's been raining and we don't want to track mud through all the house and have to go back and re-clean it. So we're going to wait a week to have the electrician come in. And I'm like, I don't care. Clean the mud. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I just wanted to touch on, all of us are learning as we're going, right? Because this is a lot of moving parts and you're dealing with contractors that like to work a certain way. And we could talk about this for another 30 minutes, but one of the last things I wanted to give a pro tip, and I know Davis touched on this in the beginning, is figure out how they like to be communicated with, right? This is a business. These guys are super busy, right? They're at Home Depot. Maybe they have 2 or 3 jobs at the same time. How do they like being communicated with? Is it by phone? Is it by text? Is it by email? This is probably a good practice in any business. The agents that are listening to this, maybe your clients like to be talked to you in text instead of phone calls. And that's the last pro tip that I would have is try and figure out the best way to communicate with them. Maybe just text is best. Maybe phone calls are best. That is our last pro tip. But I did want to give a little bit of space to Davis because I know last time you came on, you were in the process of launching this new business, Luminest Homes. And I know since then you have launched it. It's a co-hosting space. So can you give the quick marketing pitch, just in case you're open to new clients, of what that is and how that came about?
Yeah, for sure. So it's Luminest Homes. So LUMINEST homes.com. But yeah, we're live. We recently launched. It's a direct booking site, first and foremost, for furnished rentals, both short-term and midterm rentals. But also we do property management as well. So specifically for furnished rentals. Over the last 3 years of being in the business, coming out the gate, I was doing furnished rentals. And so I feel me and my team have built this knack for that particular strategy. And so, yeah, so we are open for business. We also do rent by the room as well, which are also furnished. So a hybrid of some of those strategies. But yeah, it's been great. The main thing that I focus on is it's hospitality, even if it's not short-term rentals. So in this market where people are pivoting from traditional long-term rentals, and that still works too, but I'm seeing a lot influx from like long-term rentals into furnished rentals. I think that it's still hospitality is really important, and you have to find a way to level up your game in providing not just a product, but a service to each of your guests. And we've seen that reflected in our reviews. And so it's been great the last couple of months, getting a lot more interest. But yeah, it's been fun just doubling down on the strengths that me and my team have built over the past couple of years.
I love that. And I feel like the midterm rental space is definitely a niche that hasn't been like fulfilled when it comes to property management. Most property managers either do the short-term rentals at like beaches and stuff or do the long-term rentals. But I know I've even struggled to, like, when I talk to property managers that we've interviewed, like they don't do midterm rentals. They don't have a structure for it. They don't have a schedule, like how to get people in. Like they don't like it. Or I shouldn't say they don't like it. They don't understand it enough to put it into their business plan. So I think this is definitely a niche that is underserved.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And it's interesting because with like heavy regulations on the short-term rental side, there's even that much more interest, like movement from short-term rentals into midterm rentals.
Yep.
So yeah, you're right. Even though it is relatively a new strategy, a lot of people are catching wind of it. And these short-term rental operators, they're good, right? Because they had to level up their game in the short-term rental side. And now with this influx into midterm rentals, just because you're operating a midterm rental and you have like photos that look like just not that great, you're going to have to set yourself apart with elevating your game as if you're operating a short-term rental. But you're right, it is still pretty new. I think as we look ahead in the next couple of years, we'll start to see even more saturation. And then maybe this rent by the room thing will continue to be like the main focus. Who knows? But yeah, it is a fun strategy.
No, but I agree, Davis. You're in a niche business, right? We're all in the DMV and we know how hard it is to cash flow on your rentals. It's just the way rates are, the way prices are. It's really hard to do that. So what you're doing is helping your clients. You're also doing this for your own properties to increase the revenue that you're getting for your properties by doing these furnished rentals, whether it's short term. You know how I feel about midterm. I love midterm. Davis helped me a bunch on my midterm rental here in my house hack, but what are some specific things that you're doing to stand out from making your client's house, your personal houses, your rentals stand out against the competition? Is there anything specific that you could think of that sets you apart?
Yeah, I'd say technology is really important, especially in the short-term rental space. There are so many tools for short-term rentals. It's pretty exhausting trying to go through all of them. So I would say just understanding and testing different technologies in the short-term rental space is really important. And what I mean by that is like your property management software. I think that's like the most important thing because you'll find that a bunch of other technologies are tied to that. I like to use Hospitable. I think that's becoming pretty popular now, but it's great, right? You have automated messaging, there's AI capabilities. My Schlage, like the smart lock, that is tied to it. So I never have to set a new code with each turnover, things like that. And that's just something nice because from a safety perspective, that guests like. And like Turno, which is it's like a marketplace for cleaners, but it also serves as a technology to help you operate once you do have a go-to cleaner. So I never have to book time with a cleaner. It just does it automatically. And all they need to do, the cleaner, is just accept it, or if they reject it, it'll automatically get sent to my backup cleaner and so forth. So those are just a couple of examples. So yeah, I think technology is really important.
So using technology to make it more efficient so you're not having to communicate every little detail about your short-term rentals, especially short-term rentals, because I know that can be a burden, right? That's a job in its own.
Yeah. I mean, the digital guidebook is another great example of that because it's going to answer a bunch of your questions from guests. And for short-term rentals, there's so much turnover and they're learning the house for the first time. What's the Wi-Fi password or what's the trash schedule if it's like a midterm rental where they need to take out the trash and recycling? Stuff like that can be answered in a digital guidebook or your automated messaging. So people don't realize it. If you've been operating for a while, you know these things already. But I think what a lot of investors they're scared of in short-term rentals is they don't have the bandwidth to do it, which yeah, it is high touch, it is hospitality, but 80% of that stuff can be taken care of through technology. Yeah. I might have lost a few clients by saying that, but yeah, the technology is certainly important. But yeah, and if you guys have any questions about technology that we use, or if obviously the listeners, if they have any questions, they can reach out to me directly.
That actually leads me to my next question, David. So somebody that's brand new or somebody that has a long-term rental that they're thinking of converting to a short-term or a midterm, do you help them set that up in terms of maybe furnishing or best practices and getting that ready? Or are you mainly just, hey, once you have it up and ready, I'll help manage it?
I used to do the whole setup, but it's a lot of work. And I'm happy to do that on a one-off basis. But what we like to do is if you have a listing already, pictures aren't great, and maybe some furnishing updates could be needed. That's where I like to jump in and really help my clients because it is a lot of work. And then furnishing, people have different opinions about style. And I could say all I want to about, hey, you may not like this particular style. It's not your taste, but it works. But especially those investors that have 1 or 2 properties, they're heavily emotionally invested in their property. And so with that comes very strong opinions about how they want to furnish it. And so just over the course of the last few months, I've learned, okay, that's probably a challenge that other people really want to take on. And that's great. What we like to do is focus on if you just need some work, but you're already operating.
And my last question, Davis, is people that are listening to this and they're like, "Oh, I would love to work with Davis." What are the locations? Are you nationwide? And then 2, how does the pricing work? Is that something that they pay monthly or is it by turnover? What can they expect?
Yeah. So we focus in Virginia, but we can build a team anywhere. We have the tools, again, the technology to source and vet cleaners, handymen, just the entire team. And so we can operate anywhere. And what was your next question? Or the other?
The pricing of how do they pay?
Yeah, that's also customized depending on the client. So if you're a client that, let's say your listing is amazing and you already have 4.8 out of 5 stars on Airbnb and so forth, and you just want your time to go back to your day job, we will adjust our pricing for that. So we hover around like 20% and we'll make exceptions up or down, but that's our baseline pricing. If we do rent by the room, which we also do, that's a little bit more of a lift. We'll adjust it accordingly.
Yeah. Anna, did you have any questions on
I was
that?
going to say the pricing is super reasonable because I know for short-term rentals, you're right in the ballpark of where other property managers are, and a lot of them aren't great. I know from personal experience.
Yeah. And we try to keep it pretty tight as far as, like, we're not trying to like do paid advertising and get a bunch of clients because we would be doing a disservice to our existing clients. So we try to be very selective in who we work with. And also just if they're easier to work with and we have a conversation, we're like, okay, I like this person. So we do try to qualify and just don't take on anybody because the most important thing is servicing our clients and doing right by them, committing to the things that we promised in the upfront. And the only way to do that is some filtering on our side when we look for new clients.
And I love that because I feel most property managers, they work on such, I'll say, fine margins. It seems like it's almost like a doctor's office. Like they have to just get as many homes under like their management as possible. And so that then you end up becoming a number. So having that quality control is very hard to lose with a lot of property management companies because I just don't think they're run well. And so they just have to get more and more properties to be profitable.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's not the model that we try to live by. I've had some experience personally with my portfolio with property managers, and it's not always, there's some great ones out there, but oftentimes it's not perfect. And I think they'll start really paying attention if you have a bunch of properties. But if you're just like have a handful of homes in your portfolio that they manage, you're not as important of a client, essentially. We don't ever want to get to that point. So that's how we operate.
And I love that you and your team are getting into the rent by the room, the co-living space, because I think here locally that's the next wave. And we just talked about midterm rentals, and now it's co-living. Essentially, you buy a home that has 5, 6 bedrooms, and you're renting it out by the room. You can increase cash flow, and we could probably talk about that for another hour. But I know we are running short on time, and I wanted to give you a quick space to talk about. You and I just came back from Greece. We did our first mastermind and wanted to give you some space to see what you thought about it and what were some of your takeaways from our trip.
Yeah, I was wondering if we would get to that. I love talking about this trip. So as Nico teased, you guys have talked about this already in a past episode.
We just did, yeah, one of our last episodes. Yep.
Okay, gotcha. But basically, like these all sorts of different flavors of masterminds. This is personally, this is my first one. Going into it, I thought we would talk about 90% business. It was the opposite. We talked about business 10% of the time. And Anna, I wish you and Brian were there. There was so much. I'm sure you guys have some FOMO, but I know we'll do another one in the future. But yeah, it wasn't really about business. It was about mindset, visualizing the things that are most important to you. People got emotional talking about family, their kids, leaving a legacy and things like that. And to me, going into it, I'm thinking like, okay, mindset, like I'm done with that. Like I already have the mindset. That's why I just want to know like the business, like tactics, the technicals and stuff. But the leader of the mastermind had this great example of how visualizing is done by the world's top tier athletes. And what that just means is athletes will visualize, if they're a runner crossing the finish line at a very specific time, who's around them, what they're wearing, the weather that day, just in the most like finest details. And they'll do that over and over again until the point where the moment becomes real, but it's not new because they've gone through it in their mind so many times. And that's what helps lead them to success. And so when that example was shared with all of us, the group, to me, it clicked because I'm like, okay, these top tier athletes think this is critical for them to perform at their level. Who am I to say that visualizing and mindset is not important to me? And so it really cemented the importance of visualizing and thinking about those most important things in the most minute detail so that it becomes a reality in my mind so that when it happens, I've already lived through it. There's no surprises. All I need to do is worry about celebrating that moment.
Yeah, that was definitely a powerful exercise. And one of my key takeaways was the visualization as well. Like similar to you, Davis, that was my mindset. I was like, oh, we're going to be talking about business. We're going to be talking about real estate. And it was really not much of that. And I give a shout out to Amnu and his wife, Chara, for setting up such a good community. And that's why, like, when he mentioned it, invited us, I was like, no matter what, we're going. Jess and I just bought the house and we're like, how the hell are we going to do it? I don't know, credit card. And we'll figure it out later. But I really wanted to touch on like the community and the people that were there, Davis. So I know you and I are friends and some of them we were already friends before then, but what did you get out of meeting these people and being in a room with these people?
So what I got out of it is people use the word accountability quite a bit, but the accountability is real. This was 3 weeks ago now. And I know it's still early, but what accountability does, it makes you carry on that buzz and that feeling and the energy that you got coming right out of it and just continues it down a year later or whatever. Oftentimes people will go to these meetups and big conferences like BPCon and everyone's buzzing, everyone's talking about their goals and stuff, and they feel so good coming out of it. And then 6 weeks later, they're like, I get busy with whatever excuse that they come up with. But especially in a tight-knit group, the accountability is very real. And like Nico, you and I were like doing like bi-weekly meetings just to talk about what's important, how are we achieving our goals that we talked about 2 weeks ago and so forth. And so I think that is the most critical thing, especially coming from people who you share the most intimate things about what's important to them and what's important to you. So I think that also matters.
I think it's so funny because like you don't share these type of intimate things with the people that are closest to you, or at least sometimes I don't. And then you go on a trip with strangers per se, and you're becoming very vulnerable and talking about your goals and what you can do in 5, 10, 20 years. And like you said, it builds a bond, a lifetime bond, really. Davis and now I know what his vision is for this next 5, 10 years. And I'm like, let's go. Let's fucking power through this together. Fires me up.
Yeah, for sure. Anna, have you been on one of these?
We went to the one in October in the Dominican Republic, but there weren't as many Cash Flow Breakfast Club people. Actually, we were the only Cash Flow Breakfast Club people there. So we met all new people, but very similar. It was Vivid Vision. So it's a different book, but similar concepts of really understanding your why. Because I guess that's what most of us, they tell us as entrepreneurs, like figure out what your why is. And we may have our why at a superficial level, but Omni just has a way of crafting these retreats. So like you dig in and like you said, visualize every detail. And when you really understand the why and you can see it with the colors, you can smell the smells, like it's a whole different driving force. And same thing, we had people that like had these aha moments. There were tears, there was emotion, but I would definitely go again. It's good to keep doing these every so often and keep tweaking your vision and making those connections. So we will be there again, as long as no kids are graduating or having birthdays.
Yeah, there's always being an excuse, right? Like life gets busy and it gets the best of us, but you got to like level set, step back and be like, all right, what's the most important thing here? Why am I doing all this? And then all those excuses become just that. They're excuses and you just force it and make it work.
Yeah. This one was like kids graduating from college and from high school, and one of them turning 16. So some of them, I was like, ooh, I can't justify going to Greece and paying for all of the therapy that's going to ensue with my children for not being there for their 16th birthday and college and high school graduation.
Fair and
Okay. Don't get me
And it
wrong.
will
I
be
was
on the next
kind of
one.
like for justification of why you didn't go. I think like in the future, really, I'm talking to myself because even this trip, I was like, should I go? Should I not go? I was like debating this and that. But then after coming out of it, I'm like, okay, obviously I should have been there.
Mhm.
My only regret was that my wife didn't come with me.
Next time.
Because next time for sure.
Next-
Because we talk about obviously a big part of my life. It's like we're a team, so you got to bring your team with you on these things.
Yeah, it was a game changer. Moral of the story is connect with people that are going to push you to be the fullest potential of yourself, right? So we are running out on time, Davis. We wanted to give you a shout out. Thank you. This was a great episode. Learned a ton about the contracting, the co-hosting business. So where can people reach out to you? Congratulations on your new business. Where can people reach out to you and connect with you if they have any questions?
Yeah, I think the best way right now is just Instagram. So it's at davis.h.son. So DAVIS, not a D. People always get that mixed up. Story of my life. DAVIS.h.son, spelled SON.
And what about your business? I think you have a social media for that as well.
Yeah. So that's under Luminest Homes. So again, LUMINEST Homes, plural.
Perfect.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes. If you have any questions about it, definitely reach out to Davis. You can reach out to me at N Garcia Official on all social platforms, Nico Garcia. And you can reach out to Anna at
I'm Anna Bialik _realtor on Instagram or Anna Bialik anywhere else.
Awesome. Please share, subscribe if you found any value in this episode, and tune in until the next one. See you guys.
Bye.
Thank you guys so much.
Yay.